I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about designing your life. And with the new year just a month away, I'll be talking about this quite a few times over the course of the next couple of weeks. But in reality, because you may be watching this video at any month of the year, not in December, but you may be watching it in April, May, or June, or October, or November, and in reality, that there is no right time to design your life. Really, any time and all the time is the right time to design your life. So whenever you're watching this video is the right time to be watching this video. My name is Non-Monogamous Mark, and I'm the co-founder and executive director of the nonprofit Non-Monogamous Lifestyles Association. And down towards at the end of this video, I'm going to be telling you how to kind of find out more information about Non-Monogamous Lifestyle Association, so I hope you'll stay tuned for that. Well, let's get back to talking about designing your life. You see, because my life, and even in my owning this association, my being the co-founder of this association, that's something that was designed into my life. I'm going to give you a couple of tips here today, but they're certainly not. These tips aren't going to be like everything you need to know about designing your life. So I came to a place in my life because one of the things about designing your life is that everything in our life is a part of the journey that becomes the person that we are. In a non-monogamous lifestyle association, we talk a lot about that it doesn't really matter where you're at right now. Really what matters is who you become along the way. And it's the journey that matters and who you become along the way of that journey. My own grandfather, he was a Boeing union worker at the Boeing Aircraft Company. And, the years that I knew him best were probably the last 30 years of his life. And he was just a grumpy, negative, alcoholic, drinking, he drank every day of his life, many beers. And that was just who he had become. And I looked, because when I was a youth, I didn't have any male role models in my life. And one of the things that my mom suggested to me at one time when I was having this conversation, and I was, wanting a male role model. I didn't have brothers. I didn't have a dad. I didn't have any male role models. And my mom suggested as well, why don't you have your grandfather be your role model? And I didn't want to really talk to her about that, because in my mind, what flashed through my head is there's no role model there that I want to follow. He's not the kind of person that I want to be in my life. And I've learned a lot from I guess role models that were not what I wanted to be than people that I did want to be. And our life, this journey that we're on, it's all part of our life. Whether it's the bad part of our journey, I became a religious person in my life. I didn't grow up in a religious home. There was a religious family up the street from where I grew up, and I didn't want to be anything like them. And yet, then I got interested in girls and ended up going to church because a girl invited me to church, and from that I met other girls in church, and so from that I ended up starting to become a regular churchgoer. And just slowly over time from that, I became the religious person I never wanted to be. And so, that for me then for 25 years of my journey, for 30 years actually from when I started as a youth, for 30 years of my journey, that is a part of who I am. And that's a great part of who I am, because it wouldn't have brought me to the place that I am today if I didn't have that in my life. And so that's a great part, but it's no longer a part of who I am. That's not what defines my life today. And I hope that your life is the same as well. It's always evolving. It's not sitting stale and stagnant in a place. And that's one of the things that's important about designing your life, is that your life should be expanding, and be moving forward in your life and evolving, and not just settling in and becoming stagnant in your life. And so I'm going to give you a couple tips here. And, even this, as I'm starting to mention, this Non-Monogamous Lifestyles Association, when I became non-monogamous, which was 10.5 years ago, my wife and I, after 27 years of our marriage, we opened our marriage up, and that she was the only woman I'd ever been with, the only partner, sexually I'd ever had, but it was never good. And so we went through a 2-year transition to move our marriage from monogamous into a non-monogamous marriage. And then we opened up our marriage and lived a non-monogamous life together after that. And that was a very deliberate and intentional choice that we made. Particularly, she was at that point still extremely involved in her church life. I had walked away from the church when I realized that I became the religious person I never wanted to be. And I went on a journey, which then brought me to this place of being able to talk to her about, opening our minds up to possibilities that the church doesn't offer us, like being non-monogamous. But, so that was a very deliberate and intentional move for me to go and make from monogamy to non-monogamy. And that took place a little over 10 and a half years ago then, when we opened up our marriage. But the thing is that I didn't want to turn into someone who was a liar, who was a deceptive person. And so that's why I say this is all part of our journey. And our journey can take us down a road where we become worse for it, or we become better for it. And I decided that all the sexual frustration that I had, and the difficulties that we had sexually in our marriage, and then all the things that we did to try to solve that problem, I decided I wasn't going to allow that to take me down a road that was not going to be good, like one where I started to lie and cheat to my wife, and just do things behind her back. No, that's not the choice that I made. Instead, I made a choice to go ahead and to be ethical and to try to take and talk to her. But that's why it took us 2 years. For many people, that when they transition their monogamous lifestyle and marriage and relationship into a non-monogamous relationship, it doesn't take 2 years for many people. But for me, it did, because of just where we were entrenched with our thoughts and in our religious life and all that kind of stuff. So we made a deliberate and intentional choice to go ahead and open up our marriage. And when that happened, I've been a business person all of my life. And when that happened, I said, I don't know how this is going to all happen, because I felt like I was cheated out of many years of my life, because I never knew that there were options where you could be ethically non-monogamous. So ethical and consensual, non-monogamy, consensual, where everybody is in agreement that it's okay. And that, like, I didn't just go and say, well, I'm being ethical with my wife because I'm being honest and open. I tell her I'm going to go off and have sex with this other woman. Well, but she may not really be consenting to that. And so until my wife was on board with us having an open relationship, then, I could say, well, I'm being ethical because I'm being honest and telling her. Oh, that's coercive as well, and that's damaging and hurtful and harmful. And so I, really focused on being ethical and consensual. I think that's really important. The consensual part and the ethical part go together, but you can't just choose one or the other. And so I chose to be ethical and consensual. And after 2 years after I approached my wife on an open marriage, then we went ahead and we opened our marriage. And at that time, then I says, I'm going to somehow use my business skills, because I have been self-employed and in business all of my life. And I said that I'm going to use my business skills in order to help people to, one, feel like that you're not some perverted, creepy person because you're non-monogamous, and in fact that you're perfectly normal. Two, feel that for people to know that the desires and interests that they have are perfectly normal desires and interests, and they're not something that have to be suppressed and repressed and all of that. And so, then the other thing was to create a business where it would open the door to more people to be able to consider the possibilities of being ethically and consensually non-monogamous. And so that was a desire that I had 10 years ago. And that desire then, a year and a half ago, those seeds of desire started to become fruit as I started then and became the co-founder of the Non-Monogamous Lifestyles Association. And so, that was a process. It's all part of my journey. And so that's the first point I wanted to give to you about designing your life, is to be deliberate and intentional. Be deliberate in your thinking and realize that all of your thoughts are planting seeds constantly. And are you consistently planting seeds that are taking and hitting you in a direction, or you're just like all spread out and all over the board and there's no real focus and no consistency because you're like the old pinball machines, and you're just there like that little pinball, just going bing, 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 bing all over the place, without any real direction. And so you want to be deliberate, intentional. That's how I moved my monogamous marriage after 27 years, and I started after 25 years when I first talked to my wife, is I was deliberate and intentional in living a non-monogamous life instead of a monogamous life. Now, at that time, I didn't know how well it would work out for me. It's just it seemed like under monogamy, we had tried everything else. And, and then we didn't even call it non-monogamy. I just said, I think that I should have sex with another woman, and my wife, she should have sex with another man or another woman if she wanted to. And I just said we should have sex with other people. And that's how it all started, because we didn't know it was a non-monogamy, and we didn't know about polyamory. We didn't know about, well, we had heard about swingers. They were dirty, perverted, just awful people. How wrong I was, and they're good people. They're great people. And so I just want you to, in this, talking about designing your life, and talk to you then about being deliberate and intentional with your thinking, and that's how you start making progress and moving forward and create the life that you dream to have, is that you start to be deliberate and intentional with your thinking, and also then with your thinking, but also your words and your feelings. Be deliberate and intentional. Don't be reactionary. Don't react to other things around you, but really intentionally be deliberate and intentional so that your thinking starts to come under control, and it's your control, not the control of a boss or a wife or a parent or a child, but you become deliberate and intentional with your thinking, with your feelings, and your words. And so you start to get your feelings, your thinking, and your words under your control. That's the first step of designing your life. The next little point I want to give you is to make sure that you stay authentic and open and honest in your life. I could have been deliberate and intentional when I wanted to transition my marriage and decide to go out and cheat, and not be authentic and not be open and honest. And after we did open up our marriage, then it's also continues to be a process of being authentic, open, and honest, talking about my feelings and my thoughts and the words that are coming out of my mind, being mindful, deliberate, and intentional about those. But be sure you stay authentic and open and honest. So often guys are just as guilty of this as women are. That we do things because we say things, we feel things, we think things because, it strokes my ego. Guys are really good about that, with stroking their ego, or women, because, they're sometimes submissive. Like my wife, she was very submissive and really didn't have a mind of her own. Well, that's not what I'm talking about here, is being mindless. I'm talking about being authentic and having a mind of your own and being open and honest and true to yourself with that. And so when you're there designing your life, that's a really critical part, is to have a mind of your own. Be authentic and open and honest about that. Don't just take and go along with everything when it's not necessarily, being true to yourself. Don't compromise yourself. And one of the things that my non-monogamous lifestyle has taught me how to do is how to create shifts in my life and in my relationships rather than compromises. where my partner and I, we shift and get over onto a totally different track. Instead of us trying to meet somewhere in the middle and compromise each other's authenticity and each other's inner being and each other's person being true to themselves, because we did at first when I started out my non-monogamous lifestyle and in relationships, we because that's what we're taught in the world is about compromise in relationships. And that's the only thing I knew. Just like I only knew monogamy when I started out my adult life, but I've learned new things since then. And one of the things that I've learned in my non-monogamous life is that instead of trying to always compromise, instead two people come together and create a shift over to a totally different path. That instead of compromising, they're shifting over to here and they're getting their lives further ahead. One of the times that one of my partners that I have in my life today, Kathy and I, we came to a place where for several months we were trying to work out some issues between us and how things are going to work out. We focused time and energy on that. And as we focused the time and the energy, it seems like the issue just became bigger and just kind of reminded me of my situation with my wife, that for 25 years we focused a lot of energy on the sexual part of our life because it wasn't working for either one of us. And the problem never got resolved. It never got better. It just got bigger. And my frustration grew and the bad feelings that she had grew. And so by focusing all that energy and the two of us always trying to figure out a compromise, it just didn't work. And so when Kathy and I were having issues and we were trying to do that, it just didn't work. But then one day something clicked with me and I sat down with her and I says, we're not going to keep trying to put our energy here and we're going to go ahead instead. We're going to start to create shifts. It was something I think that she and I were reading in a book by John Maxwell at the time. And he talked about creating shifts instead of creating compromises. And so she and I were both reading that book, and that just really resonated with us. And since then, in my relationships, that I've gotten better and better at creating shifts in my relationships. And so that may be something that could be helpful and useful for you to look into. So instead of compromise, you might look into creating shifts in your relationships instead. And that's become part of the new normal in my non-monogamous life. And at Non-Monogamous Lifestyles Association, that's one of the things that we really focus on is helping you to create a new normal in your personal culture and community. Because the normal that we all have is what we had growing up in a monogamous culture. And that's not the normal that we want to move forward with. And so the normal that we help you to create is a new normal that works for you in your non-monogamous life. And oftentimes then, like for me, I've learned instead of compromise, to create shifts. Shift instead. So then the last little point for today then is to be congruent in your values. When you're designing your life, that you're going to be evaluating your values. And you want to be congruent. And how many of us will point fingers at a greedy corporation who we accuse to be choosing profits over people. And yet how often in our own lives we're guilty of the very same thing, that we're pointing the fingers at someone else, where we're choosing our own personal gain and our own personal profit over people. We work hard in order to have stuff. How often do we spend our time to be able to make money so that we can have more stuff, more things, not spend more time creating relationships, rich and rewarding relationships, but instead just working more hours, trying to climb up this career or this corporate ladder in order for us to have more stuff in our life and have more things in our life. That those things and that stuff takes away from the people, enjoying the people and having the relationships with the people that we want to create. And so being congruent with your values. If you value relationships, which non-monogamy, that's really a large part of what non-monogamy is about, is creating relationships and connections with people that become sexual relationships, whether that be like in the case of swingers, that it's not as where they get involved romantically deeply, but they have these great friendships that they create sexual connections with other people, or be something like polyamory, where it's both a sexual and an emotional relationship and connection, and so that's what non-monogamy really is about, is in creating these connections with people that are sexual in nature, also emotional in nature, whether it be emotional from the standpoint of friendship or emotional from the standpoint of romantic and deeply loving with more than one person. And so we do that, and that's part of our value as non-monogamous people. But then we spend all of our time, focus on trying to make more money and stuff, and that's all good. But be intentional in your life so that flow starts to flow to you in a way where it doesn't have to just engulf you and take all of your resources with your time and energy. Where you just come home so tired all the time that you've really got nothing left for your relationships, or you're living for the weekends. And then the weekends come, there's a lot to do on the weekend, because you only get one weekend every week. You get 2 days out of 7. And there's so much to do then that time becomes a factor. So take a look at your values and be congruent. When you are designing your life, be congruent with your values. I encourage you to do some reading about minimalism. People have a lot of different thoughts and ideas about minimalism. Minimalism is not about saying that you can't have things, but it is saying that you can't have a great lifestyle. It's about taking a look at the values that you have in your life, and then having the things in your life that serve your life. I've spent 40 years of my life, 40 years, 35 years of my life, collecting lots of stuff. I made lots of money over the years, and I collected, and I got a lot of stuff. And now I'm having to deal with trying to get rid of that stuff because I don't want it. It seems like, because I said, well, I paid money for that, so I've got to keep that, And that's the problem. You pay money for something, and you feel like then that's got to be something that you hold on to. You start letting go of your stuff. And that's what minimalism's about, is just learning how to let go of things so that those things don't end up controlling and ruling your life, and then put you in a position that you've got to spend more of your time working for more stuff. Instead, you can start to live a freer life, and a life that you love to live instead. And so thanks a lot. Like I said, I'll be making more videos about this idea of living intentionally and designing your life, so that hopefully throughout the month that you'll be watching them, and that you will get some preparation ready to take your life into the next year, or if you're watching this video in some month in the middle of the year, just take your life forward in the next month and get started with designing your life. And if you want to know more about Non-Monogamous Lifestyles Association, where we help to liberate people's sexuality and their relationships, then we provide tools and support for them. If you want to know more about that, and also about myself, Non-Monogamous Mark, then go ahead and click on that link at the top of the description for this video. And clicking on that link will take you over to my website, and you can get on our email list. Thank you very much.